In the heart of a ruthless winter storm, deep within the Nevada wilderness, a Mustang lay frozen in the snow, barely clinging to life. The wind roared through the mountains, and the thick, swirling snow obscured every trace of the wild creature's struggle. He had been abandoned, left to die alone in the bitter cold. But then, out of nowhere, a man appeared, a stranger to this harsh land. A rancher named Cole discovered the injured horse, its movements nearly halted, his body bruised and his breath shallow. In that critical moment, the Mustang, against all odds, lifted its head and fixed its desperate eyes on Cole, its gaze filled with pleading anguish. With one final heart-wrenching cry, the horse silently begged for help. What happened next would shatter everything Cole thought he knew about survival, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between man and beast. The storm continued to rage as Cole rode through the blinding snow, his own horse's hooves crunching through thick layers of ice coating the ground. The wind was relentless, biting through his jacket as though it possessed a will of its own, rendering visibility almost non-existent. Even though Cole knew the area well, the desolation of the frozen landscape made him feel insignificantly small. His family's ranch lay miles behind, and he had hoped to return before the storm reached full fury, but now it was clear he was not going to make it. As he urged his steed forward, thoughts of the warmth of his cabin and the hot meal waiting inside battled with a sudden distraction. In the distance, a dark shape barely visible in the white haze stood motionless. Curiosity seized him as he turned his horse toward that figure, hoping initially it was nothing more than a tree or a pile of rocks. But as he drew closer, his heart sank. It was another horse, a wild Mustang, proud yet clearly in distress. The snow around was splattered with blood, and the animal's sides heaved with shallow, labored breaths. Cole dismounted and walked slowly toward the suffering Mustang, his boots crunching on the frozen earth. The animal lay awkwardly on the ground, its legs splayed beneath it, its wide, terrified eyes locked onto Cole's as if pleading for salvation. For a long, poignant moment, man and beast regarded each other in silence, two strangers united by the fury of the storm. Although the Mustang's body trembled from the cold, it made no move to flee. Cole knelt beside the creature, his heart pounding as he realized that in all his years on the ranch, he had never witnessed such raw despair. The Mustang's ribs were painfully visible beneath its matted coat, and deep, jagged cuts marred its flanks, a testimony to the ordeal it had endured. "Hey there, Cole," he murmured softly, his voice barely rising above the howling wind. "I'm not here to hurt you." With deliberate caution, he extended his gloved hand to stroke the animal's neck. To his astonishment, the Mustang did not recoil. Instead, it let out a soft, feeble whinny, its breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. Cole's chest tightened. Though the creature was too weak to stand, the fierce determination in its eyes declared it was not ready to surrender. As the storm intensified and the snow fell in thick sheets, Cole realized he could not leave the Mustang to perish. Alone and miles from help, the animal was in no condition to survive much longer in this merciless weather. "Hang on," Cole muttered, his voice trembling with resolve as he surveyed the desolate landscape. Nearby stood a small shack, an old hunting cabin from his youth, which offered the only hope of shelter. He knew he had to get the Mustang there, out of the storm, yet carrying the injured animal seemed nearly impossible, and he could not risk leaving it behind. Then, the Mustang emitted another soft, desperate whinny, a plea that clenched Cole's heart. Without a moment's hesitation, he rummaged in his pack for the emergency rope he always carried. "You're not alone," he whispered more to himself than to the trembling animal as the storm roared on around them. Cole carefully tied the rope around the Mustang's chest, securing it as best he could. The creature's eyes followed his every move, the pain and exhaustion etched clearly in them, nearly shattering his resolve. Tightening the knot, he slowly began to pull, leading the Mustang step by arduous step toward the cabin. As the snow grew heavier and each breath felt as though it might be his last, the urgency in the Mustang's faltering movements spurred him onward despite the blinding blizzard. Approaching the cabin, Cole's heart pounded fiercely as the Mustang stumbled, its weakened legs buckled beneath it. His hands shook as he reached down to steady the animal, murmuring, "You're going to make it," even though he wasn't sure he truly believed it. The Mustang's head drooped, and for a harrowing moment, Cole feared it would collapse completely. But then, with a defiant surge, the Mustang raised its head once more, its eyes glimmering with an almost indescribable trust. In that pivotal moment, Cole understood that this was not merely about survival. It was about something deeper, something that transcended the wild instincts of the Mustang and the duty of a rancher. This was a bond forged in the midst of a brutal storm, between two beings battling against overwhelming odds. Cole swallowed hard, his breath coming in labored gasps, and vowed, "I'm not leaving you, buddy. We're in this together." Just as they reached the cabin door, the Mustang let out a low, pleading whinny, a sound that sent a shiver down Cole's spine. Something inside him snapped into fierce determination. He refused to let this horse die in the cold. Inside the small cabin, the fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the howling blizzard outside. Cole had done everything he could. He had laid down hay to cushion the Mustang's exhausted body, covered it with blankets, and ensured it was sheltered from the relentless storm. Yet, despite his every effort, the Mustang's breathing remained shallow, and its body continued to tremble with every exhaled breath. Cole sat nearby, his cold hands clasping the edge of a wooden table as he watched the animal intently, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. He had never imagined finding a creature in such dire distress, in desperate need of help that only he could give. His mind raced with thoughts of the hardships he faced back at the ranch. His family's business had been struggling for months, feed prices had soared, and the crops had failed to withstand the extreme weather. It was now just him and his younger sister, fighting to make ends meet. This was not the life he had envisioned, alone in the middle of nowhere, trying to rescue a horse he barely knew. But he could not turn his back. He could not leave it to die. Cole leaned forward, his fingers brushing the Mustang's mane as he noticed a subtle twitch in the animal's muscles, a sign it was still conscious, still fighting. He couldn't let it go, not while there remained a spark of life. Minutes stretched into hours as Cole tried everything he could to help the Mustang regain its strength. He gently massaged its legs to coax the blood to circulate, speaking softly to comfort both himself and the creature, yet the Mustang only responded with shallow, labored breaths, as if the burden of the world pressed too heavily upon it. Then, as Cole prepared to fetch additional supplies from his saddlebag, he heard a faint noise, a soft, nearly inaudible whinny. His heart skipped a beat. The Mustang was trying to speak. Cole rushed back to its side, kneeling once more beside the struggling animal. "Hey, you're going to be all right," he whispered. His voice, trembling with reassurance, meant more for himself than for the horse. The Mustang's eyes flickered open, locking onto Cole with a raw, desperate plea that he could not ignore, even as the storm's fury persisted outside. Inside the cabin, it felt as though time itself had halted. Cole remained by the Mustang's side, gently cradling its head and offering every bit of comfort he could muster. There was a strange, overwhelming feeling in this responsibility he had assumed. He felt intrinsically connected to the animal. It was no longer merely a wild creature. It had become something more, something that needed him as much as he needed it. Cole recalled his life before the ranch, before everything had shifted. He had grown up surrounded by animals, cherishing horses, yet life had gradually drawn him into a solitary existence, far from the freedom and camaraderie of his youth. In many ways, this Mustang evoked the life he had once dreamed of, a life filled with freedom and raw strength. As he glanced out the window at the swirling, relentless snow, his mind raced with thoughts of an uncertain future. He knew he could not linger here forever. He had to return to the ranch, to his family, to the life he once knew. But how could he abandon an animal that had, with its final, desperate plea, begged for help? Suddenly, the Mustang shifted its trembling body as it struggled to rise, and a surge of hope warmed Cole's cold heart. "Easy, buddy," he murmured softly, his hands swiftly reaching out to steady the faltering animal. The Mustang's legs wobbled, and for a brief moment, Cole feared it would collapse once more. Yet, the creature managed to stand. "I'll be here for you," Cole said shakily. "You're stronger than you appear." The Mustang took a few slow, measured steps, its hooves scraping lightly against the worn wooden floor. Cole moved beside it, placing a steady hand on its shoulder, and declared, "We're going to get through this together." Those words, spoken with trembling conviction, gave him a fragile hope. He did not know how, but he vowed to find a way. Just as that spark began to kindle, a loud crack echoed through the room, the unmistakable sound of the roof creaking under the snowstorm's relentless weight. Cole froze, his eyes widening in alarm as the Mustang's head jerked upward toward the ceiling, its ears flicking nervously while the wind howled and the storm intensified by the second. His pulse quickened. The cabin's temporary shelter would not last much longer. He realized he had to get the Mustang back out into the storm. Though the raging tempest outside was fierce, the cabin, offering only brief refuge, would soon be insufficient. Grabbing the rope once more, Cole looped it carefully around the animal's chest, his fingers trembling from the biting cold. "Come on, we're not giving up now," he muttered. Though weakened, The Mustang emitted a low, understanding whinny, and together they moved toward the door, the blizzard outside waiting ominously. As they stepped out into the swirling white, Cole understood that the true test was just beginning. The storm was fiercer than ever, and he was about to confront a trial like none other, with the still-shaking Mustang depending on him for survival. The wind roared like a living beast, whipping the snow into blinding torrents that sliced through Cole's clothes and froze his breath midair. The Mustang stumbled beside him, its head bowed and its breath shallow. With every faltering step, Cole's heart skipped a beat. He reached out, grasping the rope that bound them, and gently tugged, urging the animal to take a few more steps. "Come on, you've got this," Cole urged, his voice cracking from the cold, unsure if his words were meant for the Mustang or for himself. He had never experienced a storm this brutal, never felt so exposed as they trudged forward. His mind raced with thoughts of his sister back at the ranch. He had promised to return before dark hours ago, and now he rued not having prepared better. But it was just him and the Mustang now, and he had to see them through. There was no other choice. The snow fell in relentless sheets, blanketing the ground with each gust, reducing visibility to mere feet. Cole gripped the rope tighter, desperate to keep the Mustang close. Then, a soft whinny broke through the howling wind, and Cole stopped dead in his tracks, his heart leaping in his chest. He turned around quickly, his breath catching in his throat. The Mustang was no longer following. "Hey, Cole!" he called desperately, but the wind swallowed his words. There was no response. Pushing forward through the deep snow, his boots sinking into the frozen earth, he strained to follow the unmistakable sound of the Mustang's movement. He pulled harder on the rope, trying to draw the animal back, but his efforts seemed futile. Fear surged within him. He had to retrieve the Mustang before it wandered too far, before the storm engulfed them both. The snow thickened, and the blizzard accelerated. Cole's heart pounded as he stumbled, his legs growing heavier with each step. He could not afford to lose the Mustang now. Suddenly, the rope jerked hard in his hands, nearly toppling him. The Mustang was pulling away, fighting against a nearby pole. Panic flooded Cole's chest, but he refused to relent. Shouting with ragged determination, he gritted his teeth and yanked the rope, forcing the Mustang to come back toward him. The animal whinnied sharply, and for a moment, Cole thought he heard something else, a cry of pain. His stomach churned at the realization that the Mustang was utterly exhausted, its strength drained by the relentless storm. "Please, just stay with me," Cole whispered, his voice thick with desperation and helplessness, as the wind continued to howl, biting into his face, and the snow fell so heavily it nearly blinded him. The cold sank deep into his bones, yet there was no time to pause. The Mustang ceased struggling against the rope as Cole tugged it closer, desperate to keep the animal upright. They were running out of time, and Cole knew that without shelter soon, neither would survive the storm. With one final burst of effort, the Mustang's hooves shattered the snow, and it collapsed to its knees in utter exhaustion. Cole rushed to its side, his hands trembling as he attempted to lift the horse back onto its feet. His heart skipped a beat when the Mustang's eyes, raw and pleading, locked onto his, and in that silence, a mutual understanding passed between them. Now, with the storm raging fiercely, Cole could feel his own strength waning. He had to act swiftly. Wiping the snow from his face, he scanned the area desperately. Just beyond them, a small rock outcropping had risen from the ground, offering scant shelter from the tempest. "That's our chance," Cole murmured more to himself than to the Mustang. Seizing the rope once again, he summoned every ounce of remaining strength to guide the horse toward the rocky refuge. The snow reached up to their knees, and every step felt interminable, but finally they arrived at the outcropping. It wasn't much, yet it shielded them from the worst of the wind. Cole collapsed beside the Mustang, his body shaking with exhaustion as he whispered, "We made it," his voice barely audible above the storm. The Mustang, still trembling, lowered its head, and Cole rested his hand on its neck, feeling the warmth of its body contrast with the bitter cold that enveloped them. Both battered and teetering on the edge of collapse, they were, in that moment, alive and together. The storm's fury had not abated. Cole's muscles screamed from hours of battling the relentless snow, and the meager shelter of the rock offered little comfort. Yet, even as the cold gnawed at his bones and his body's warmth ebbed away with each passing hour, the Mustang remained by his side, shivering uncontrollably, its coat matted with a mix of snow and sweat. It had been silent for what felt like an eternity, its shallow breaths the sole sound in the vast frozen wasteland. Cole had tried everything, wrapping the horse in blankets, rubbing its legs to restore circulation, But nothing seemed to revive its waning strength. The Mustang was failing faster than he had anticipated, and harsh reality was settling in. He could not let the horse die here, not in this merciless storm. Cole glanced out at the raging tempest, his eyes narrowing. There was no sign of the storm abating. The wind had grown even stronger, and snow now fell in thick, heavy sheets that blurred everything beyond 10 feet. The path they had taken was lost in a white haze. His mind raced as he observed the Mustang. Once, its eyes had burned with life, but now they appeared dull with exhaustion. It was clear that the animal could go no further, and Cole knew it would not survive much longer if they remained exposed. Yet, he couldn't carry it. There was simply no way to do so. Clenching his fists, he resolved that he could not abandon the horse to die in the storm. That would betray who he was. Memories of his sister waiting back at the ranch flooded his thoughts. If he didn't return soon, both of them would face dire consequences, for the ranch was barely surviving, and he could not afford to be lost forever. Slowly, his aching legs carried him to face the Mustang one last time. The animal's eyes followed him with a pleading look, as though it sensed that Cole was about to make the hardest choice of his life, whether to remain or seek help. "Stay here," he whispered more to himself than to the creature. "I'll go get help." He turned in the direction he believed the ranch lay, trying to steady his breath despite the relentless cold. He had no choice. He had to leave the Mustang, at least temporarily, to fetch assistance, hoping someone could reach them before it was too late. But as he took a few hesitant steps, the wind howled behind him, and something within him twisted. The look in the Mustang's eyes, full of raw dependence despite years of wild independence, shook him to his core. He couldn't bear to leave it. Not now, not after all they had endured together. He wondered if he was truly walking away or merely seeking help to save them both. Freezing where his boots met the icy ground, the thought sank in. He couldn't just abandon it. The swirling snow intensified as if the storm itself were testing his resolve. His breath came in short gasps, and the crushing weight of the situation pressed upon his chest. If he left, the Mustang might perish. If he stayed, they both risked death. Glancing back, he saw the Mustang's eyes following him with a quiet trust that broke his heart. "I'm not leaving you," he declared firmly, his voice barely audible in the wind. "We're in this together." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, he made a decision. He couldn't risk leaving the Mustang behind, but he also could not remain in the frozen rock shelter, isolated and unable to summon help. With trembling hands, he untied the rope from around the Mustang's chest, carefully guiding the horse to rise. The Mustang wobbled, its legs giving out once more, but Cole held it up, refusing to let it collapse. After a brief moment when the animal seemed to gather its strength, it pushed forward, determined to continue despite its exhaustion. Swelling with fierce pride, Cole realized that this wild Mustang, which had fought against impossible odds, now looked to him for the strength to overcome yet another challenge. He retied the rope around the Mustang's chest, drawing a deep breath as he ensured the animal was stable enough to walk. "We're not giving up," he murmured softly, unsure whether his words were meant to bolster the Mustang or to reinforce his own resolve, while the wind still roared around them. Together, they stepped out of the meager shelter and into the raging storm once again. The wind lashed at their faces, but neither faltered. Every step was an arduous battle. Cole's body cried out for rest while the Mustang's trembling legs struggled forward. As he trudged on, he thought he caught sight of a faint shadow in the distance, a barely discernible silhouette through the swirling snow. His heart skipped a beat. Was it a rock formation, a tree, or something else entirely? "Keep going," he urged, his voice hoarse and rough, uncertain of how much further they could push on, yet resolved that as long as the Mustang remained by his side, he would not stop, not yet. The storm showed no mercy. The blizzard worsened, and the snowfall piled higher than ever before, transforming the world into an endless expanse of white. With each step, they battled against an unseen force, the wind tearing at them with icy, stinging fingers that numbed their skin and bones. Progress was minimal, and the Mustang's pace dwindled further as its coat grew heavier with snow. Cole, exhausted and barely able to keep his eyes open, pressed forward, frequently glancing back to ensure the Mustang remained close. Its breath came out heavy and labored, and a deep, unsettling feeling began to grow in his chest. He knew the Mustang was struggling to remain upright, its every step a battle against the relentless storm, yet Cole had no choice but to keep moving. He had to get both of them out of this icy clutches. The ridge lay just ahead, or so he hoped. Though his mind was clouded by exhaustion and biting cold, he recalled that the ridge had always been their goal. If they reached it, the cabin would come into view, a promise of shelter and warmth. Just a little longer, Cole whispered softly to the Mustang, his voice raw from cold and fatigue. "You can make it," he urged, though even as the words left his lips, doubt crept into his heart. The storm raged on with a fury that rendered visibility nearly zero, and it was possible they were simply circling in an endless white void. Suddenly, the Mustang faltered beside him. This time, Cole couldn't catch it in time. The animal collapsed into the snow with a strained whinny, its legs giving way under the weight of despair. Cole's heart nearly stopped. He dropped to his knees beside the trembling Mustang, his own breath shallow as he fought to regain his bearings. "No, no, no," he muttered under his breath, the cold biting deeper as panic infiltrated his voice. His hands shook uncontrollably as he tried to lift the Mustang back onto its feet, but the animal's body lay limp with exhaustion, its eyes closed in surrender to the relentless chill. It was in that agonizing moment that Cole realized how perilously close they were to the ridge's edge. If they did not ascend to higher ground soon, they might not survive the storm at all. The snow was piling up at an alarming rate, and the tempest showed no sign of relenting. Desperation overcame him as Cole pressed his face against the Mustang's matted mane, his own tears freezing mid-fall. He was losing the battle. The Mustang was not going to make it through this ordeal. "I'm sorry," he whispered in a broken tone, unsure if the animal could hear his apology, yet knowing in his heart that he had failed his promise to both his sister and the Mustang. It all felt futile, as if survival were a distant dream slipping away into the merciless storm. But then, just when hope seemed utterly lost, something miraculous occurred. The Mustang stirred beneath him, a subtle, trembling movement that registered almost imperceptibly at first. Then, the animal's head lifted ever so slightly, its eyes slowly opening to reveal a quiet, determined intensity. For a long, charged moment, Cole simply stared at the Mustang, his heart hammering in disbelief. Could it be that the creature was truly going to rise again? Its legs quivered, betraying the agony of every step, yet with a deep, pained breath, the Mustang pushed itself upright. Cole gasped, scarcely able to believe what his eyes were showing him. The Mustang was still fighting, it was still alive. Scrambling to his feet, his hands trembling uncontrollably, Cole guided the Mustang onto its unsteady legs. Though the animal swayed precariously, it did not fall. "Come on," Cole urged in a hoarse yet determined voice. "We're not giving up." "You're not giving up." The Mustang, as if it understood every word, shifted its weight and took hesitant, careful steps forward. Each movement was measured and deliberate, and together they inched closer to the ridge. The storm roared on with unyielding might, yet the bond between man and beast grew ever stronger in the face of adversity. Both were at their absolute breaking point, yet neither was willing to surrender. The wind howled louder than ever as they ascended, their bodies screaming in protest, while the deepening snow made every step a grueling effort. Still, Cole could glimpse the ridge now, barely a rise in the endless white, but enough to signify safety. With each sluggish, determined step, hope kindled within him. But then, as they finally crested the ridge, something struck Cole like a forceful blow to the stomach. The sight that met his eyes was utterly unexpected. A solitary figure stood at the ridge's summit, barely discernible through the swirling, blinding snow. For an agonizing moment, Cole wondered if his fatigued mind was deceiving him, but then the figure raised a hand in a tentative wave. Cole's heart skipped a beat. It was a person, a rescuer, perhaps someone who had braved the storm in search of help. "Hey, Cole!" he shouted, his voice straining to carry over the tumult. "Over here, we need help." Yet the figure did not reply immediately. Instead, as they turned and began slowly moving in Cole's direction, his heart pounded with a mingling of fear and fragile hope. Maybe they weren't entirely alone after all. But as the figure drew nearer, a strange disquiet began to stir in Cole's chest. The person's silhouette, though clad in heavy protective layers, moved with an odd, hesitant slowness that betrayed not urgency but utter defeat. Cole squinted, straining to make out details, until it became horrifyingly clear. This was not a rescuer, but another lost soul, another survivor battling the storm's wrath. The Mustang let out a low whinny as it turned to look at him, its eyes wide with a familiar urgency. For the first time since the nightmare began, Cole realized he was not alone in his fight against the storm. They were all locked in this desperate struggle for survival. The figure, now close enough to reveal the heavy, worn clothing and gaunt features of a man long battered by the elements, collapsed suddenly into the snow with a soft, helpless cry. "Hey, Cole!" he called out as Cole rushed to his side, his feet slipping on the treacherous, icy ground. "Are you all right?" The weak voice of the stranger emerged amidst the unrelenting wind. As Cole knelt, brushing the snow gently from the man's pale face, the reality struck him hard. The man was far younger than Cole, yet his eyes held the same haunting exhaustion that the Mustangs had. Where are you from?" Cole managed, his tone thick with concern and mounting frustration. "I was heading back to the ranch," the stranger rasped, his voice barely coherent. "But the snow, I couldn't make it far." Panic surged within Cole as he realized the man had come from the same direction they were striving to reach. If the stranger could not survive, what hope did Cole have? "We're not far from the ridge," Cole asserted, forcing calm into his wavering voice. "We can make it, you and me. We'll get through this." The Mustang shifted nervously at his side, snorting and stamping in the deep snow. Cole glanced between the Mustang and the stranger, and with newfound resolve, he declared, "I'll help you. I'm not leaving you here," though the man shook his head weakly, muttering that it was too much to bear. Cole's determination remained unshaken. He had fought too hard to let the storm claim another life. With a final, resolute breath, Cole took a step forward, offering his arm to the stranger. "We're in this together," he insisted. The stranger hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the Mustang, who stood steadfast and unwavering beside Cole, almost as if to affirm the truth of his words. The Mustang's labored, thick puffs of breath and trembling form spoke of a battle waged against impossible odds, and Cole, despite the cold that numbed his limbs, felt an indomitable surge of unity. In that moment, with the storm howling its bitter lament, Cole resolved that he would not yield. He would fight the storm, rescue his companions, and together, defy the fury of nature. "All right," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "All right, let's go together." They began moving forward, the snow stinging their faces as the wind whipped mercilessly around them. Cole wasn't sure if the man could even make it to the ridge. He wasn't sure if either of them could, but he was determined to try. The Mustang was a steady presence beside him, its steps slow but purposeful. They moved as a unit now, three souls fighting against the elements. There was no time for doubt, no room for hesitation. But then, as they pushed through the snow, the wind suddenly died down, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The storm seemed to pause for just a moment, a brief lull in the chaos that had gripped them for what felt like forever. Cole looked up, his breath catching in his throat. Through the clearing snow, he could see something, a faint outline in the distance, a silhouette, the shape of a building, the cabin. "We're almost there," Cole whispered to the man, his voice barely audible in the stillness. But just as he said it, the storm picked up again, stronger than before. The wind tore through them with renewed fury, and the snow once again blurred everything in front of them. The man beside him stumbled, his feet slipping out from under him as his strength failed. Cole reached out, catching him just in time before he hit the ground. "You can't give up now," Cole urged in a raw, trembling voice. "We're so close. You're not going to die out here. We're almost there." But the man only shook his head, a weak, defeated laugh escaping his lips. "It's too late for me," he said, his voice full of resignation. "You need to go. You need to make it." The words hit Cole like a punch to the gut. He wasn't ready to let go of this man, not yet. But as he looked at the Mustang, its steady, unwavering presence beside them, Cole knew what he had to do. He couldn't carry the man any further. He couldn't let the storm break them both. "We'll make it together," Cole said, his voice trembling with resolve, as he helped the man back to his feet and pushed forward. "We're almost there," he continued, and this time, with every step they took, Cole felt the pull of hope. It wasn't just the cabin in the distance. It was something deeper, a belief that no matter what the storm had taken from them, they could still make it together. The storm was relentless, the wind howling with fury, yet somehow the cabin ahead seemed to grow clearer with each agonizing step. Every part of Cole's body screamed for rest, for relief from the cold that gnawed at him, but he refused to stop, not now. The man, though weak and barely able to keep up, stayed with him, and the Mustang, oh, the Mustang, its body shuddering from exhaustion yet still pressing forward beside them, had become more than just a companion. It had become a symbol of everything they'd fought through together: resilience, hope, survival. With every step closer to the cabin, Cole's heart grew heavier with the weight of the choice that lay ahead. The man beside him was fading, his steps growing slower, his breaths shallower. Cole could feel the man's weight against him and knew that if they didn't reach shelter soon, they might lose him. The storm had already taken too much. Yet they were so close. The cabin was no longer a mere shadow. It was a tangible reality, its soft glow of light peeking from the windows a promise of warmth and safety, just within reach. "Stay with me," Cole whispered hoarsely as he tightened his grip on the man's arm, growing desperate, his thoughts turning into frantic pleas, though he couldn't show his fear. Not yet, not when they were so near. The Mustang snorted as if urging them forward with one final, strained push, and they reached the door of the cabin. Cole was so out of breath he couldn't even knock. He simply pushed the door open with every ounce of strength he had left. The warmth inside hit him like a wall, and for a moment he just stood there, blinking, trying to adjust to the sudden shift from biting cold to a soft, enveloping heat, but there was no time to savor the relief. The man beside him slumped, his legs giving way beneath him as Cole gently guided him toward a chair. "Help him," Cole called out, his voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. Inside the cabin, an older woman rushed to the man's side. She looked as if she had seen much in her years, her face weathered by time and experience, yet the look in her eyes when she glanced at Cole was full of recognition. She had seen people come in from the storm before, people who had battled this very fury. She immediately went to work, checking the man's pulse and murmuring words of comfort as she wrapped him in blankets, trying to warm his frozen body. Cole stepped back, watching the scene unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to help, but all he could do was stand there helplessly as the older woman worked quickly and efficiently. Then, he turned his attention to the Mustang still standing in the doorway, the horse shivering violently, its chest heaving as it teetered on the brink of collapse. "I'm so sorry," Cole whispered to the Mustang, his chest tightening as he stepped over and patted its freezing coat. "We're here now, you made it," as if understanding, the Mustang nuzzled him gently. Its breath was ragged, its eyes full of fatigue, but there was something deeper in those eyes, a silent message that told Cole this journey meant more than mere survival. The older woman finished checking the man's vitals and looked up at Cole. "He's alive, but he's in bad shape," she said softly. "We'll need to keep him warm and monitor him." Cole exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, and turned back to the Mustang. "Now we just need to take care of you too." The woman offered him a soft smile. "We'll get the horse inside as well. There's a stable out back, but we must bring him in carefully. He's as much a survivor as you are." Cole nodded, his body feeling as though it had been drained of all energy, but as he looked back at the Mustang, he realized something profound. They had both made it against all odds. They had survived the storm. The storm had tried to take everything from them, yet in the end, it had only strengthened their bond. It had tested their courage, resilience, and will to fight, but it hadn't broken them. The older woman helped Cole guide the Mustang toward the stable, and as he led the horse inside, he turned to see the man now wrapped in blankets, his breathing steady but still shallow. It wasn't over, not yet, but the hardest part was behind them. As the stable door closed, Cole rested his head against the Mustang's side, feeling the warmth of its body against his own. They had made it against all odds. They had found their way home. And in that poignant moment, as the storm raged on outside, Cole knew one thing for sure. They were stronger than the storm and would always be. If this story touched your heart, remember, courage and compassion can overcome any challenge. Subscribe to Thunder Hoofbeats, leave a like, and share it with someone who loves heartfelt stories like this one.